July was officially the hottest month ever recorded on this planet. Hundreds of millions of people suffered through record temperatures. And while those hundreds of millions were doing everything possible to avoid the dangerous heat, the government of Tunisia picked July as the time to violently expel more than 1,000 migrants, brutally beating them, dumping them along the desert border with minimal food and water. As temperatures soared well past 100 degrees Fahrenheit, these migrants had little protection from the elements. Things were so bad that some even resorted to drinking seawater. Across the Mediterranean, it's also been a brutal year for refugees trying to flee from Syria into Turkey. This year alone, 16 people have been killed in more than 400 attacks by Turkish forces along the border, according to one humanitarian group. In one especially violent incident in March, Turkish officials brutally confronted arriving migrants, beating them for hours, torturing them with pliers, and forcing them to drink diesel fuel, ultimately injuring 6 people and leaving 2 dead, according to Human Rights Watch. And it's not any better for migrants in Hungary, where the ultra-right-wing Prime Minister Viktor Orban says he will stop at nothing to keep Muslim invaders out. Refugees have reported being beaten by several Hungarian officers at once for upwards of 2 hours, and several migrants told Human Rights Watch that officers used tear gas, plastic handcuffs and attack dogs on refugees before ultimately expelling them to Serbia. Tunisia, Turkey, Hungary, autocratic or dictatorial foreign countries that we rightly criticize for their cruel and inhumane treatment of migrants at their border. I'm sure you were appalled, disgusted even, as I told you about what's going on over there. But if you think they're bad, just wait until you hear about the atrocities at another international border crossing. A border where security forces pushed children and babies into a river, where migrants' dead bodies have been found floating after horrific drownings. A border where families, pregnant women even, are getting tangled up and trapped in barbed wire fences. A border that, in my opinion, should be receiving way more outrage from the public and from the media. And I'm not talking about North Africa or the Mediterranean. I'm talking about America. About our own border, specifically the Texas southern border with Mexico. That's where Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott is carrying out atrocities. Yes, atrocities against migrants through a program he calls Operation Lone Star. Abbott launched the program in 2021 in response to what Republicans called President Biden's soft policies on the border. It's cost more than $5 billion so far, and it's done little to slow illegal border crossings. Mostly it's been a vessel for Governor Abbott to harm migrants in the service of political stunts. This past Christmas Eve, Abbott even used the program to bus migrants to the D.C. home of Vice President Kamala Harris. That night happened to be the coldest Christmas Eve on record, and they were dumped outdoors. It's just gotten worse since then. Don't take it from me, take it from the people working for Governor Abbott on the front lines. Just a few weeks ago, a Texas state trooper wrote an email to his superiors to share the deep concern about the inhumane things he saw this summer while working for Governor Abbott and Operation Lone Star. The email described a host of issues, including how barbed wire at the border has allegedly hurt and sometimes killed migrants. In one account, the trooper described an exhausted 4-year-old girl, 4 years old, who was pressed back by border control agents as she was crossing through a barbed wire barrier. The child ended up fainting and was sent to an emergency medical services unit. In another incident, a teenager broke his leg while trying to avoid barbed wire in the river and had to be carried by his father. The trooper also described an incident when a pregnant 19-year-old got trapped in barbed wire and suffered a miscarriage. This is what the policy of Governor Abbott looks like in action. The same Governor Abbott who claims to be all about protecting life.
Texas will be the strongest pro-life state in the United States of America.
Interesting. I wonder if Abbott was still feeling that pro-life passion as he put up those barbed wire barriers. His commitment to protecting life obviously excludes the sanctity of migrant lives, of unborn migrant children. I mean, what can we expect after hearing how he characterized migrants on CNN?
If this is not an invasion, what is? Think about the volume of people coming across the border, and look at what was happening on the ground in El Paso alone before the president showed up. It was all cleaned up, of course, right before he arrived, but they had completely overtaken all the streets of downtown, not all, many of the streets of downtown El Paso in ways where control had been ceded. to those who had come from another country.
Talk of an invasion is the language of the far right. It goes hand in hand with the racist Great Replacement theory popular among authoritarians around the world, including Hungary's Viktor Orban and the president of Tunisia, who said immigration from sub-Saharan Africa was changing his country's demographic makeup. But of course, Abbott isn't just talking like far-right leaders, he's acting like them. The Texas state trooper described how with record high temperatures up to 108 degrees Fahrenheit, troopers were told to withhold water from dehydrated migrants. Hey, what would Jesus do, Governor Abbott? Troopers were at one point ordered to push small children and babies who come to the border back into the Rio Grande, a river that, thanks to Governor Abbott, has traps of razor wire barrels. Razor wire barrels which have significantly increased the risk of drownings. That's all in the troopers' email to their superiors. Dated July 3rd, it came the same weekend that 4 migrants, including an infant, were found dead in the Rio Grande after drowning. The troopers' email described another instance that weekend in which a mother and her 2 children drowned while crossing the river. Now, the Texas Department of Public Safety has said it is investigating the abuses that the state trooper mentioned in that email. And since the events that the trooper described, Governor Abbott has made the crossing even more dangerous for migrants.
In addition to that, we now have these buoys in the water to prevent people from even crossing the middle part of the Rio Grande River coming into the state of Texas.
Yes, a barricade of wrecking ball-sized buoys stretching over 1,000 feet in the Rio Grande, forcing migrants crossing the river to find even more treacherous spots in their way.
Some migrants believe these buoys put them at risk. This man from Venezuela says, "We come with children walking for months to find this barrier that we cannot cross."
Last week, the Justice Department sued Texas to remove those buoys, and the White House press secretary called out Governor Abbott over the policy.
It is atrocious, the actions that he decides to take. He takes this, instead of dealing with this issue in a way that we can get to a resolution or working together, he turns it into a political stunt.
But Abbott has bragged about his stunt, claiming that this humanitarian crisis was created because of, quote, Biden's refusal to secure the border. And in response to that trooper's email about the brutal tactics of state troopers, Abbott said this, quote, Texas is deploying every tool and strategy to deter and repel illegal crossings between ports of entry. The absence of these tools and strategies, including concertina wire that snags clothing, encourages migrants to make potentially life-threatening and illegal crossings. Yes, the Christian Republican governor of the country's second biggest state is admitting here that the purpose of that wire is to snag clothing, while at the same time ridiculously claiming that it's saving lives. Because, of course, the way you save innocent lives is to booby-trap a river full of innocent people. Is that what Jesus would do? Texas Democratic Congressman Joaquin Castro had strong words about the governor's plan.
I want to be clear about this. What Greg Abbott is proposing, or what he intends to put out in that water, are drowning devices. Those things are going to force people to drown. Children, disabled people, mothers, and others.
The truth is that Governor Abbott has overseen the sickest border abuses since Trump separated children from their families and made it government policy. In fact, Governor Abbott is bringing back the policy of family separations. The Texas Department of Public Safety told the Houston Chronicle this week that it has started separating fathers from the rest of their families. Immigration lawyers told the Chronicle at least 24 families have been broken up since the middle of July. Troopers have taken fathers into state custody while transferring other family members to U.S. Border Patrol. As of this week, lawyers said that many families were still separated despite being told they would be reunited quickly. So look, it's all a sick joke. The idea that Abbott, the man with the razor wire, the man in charge of a border where kids are pushed back into a river, the man separating young children from their parents, is protecting migrants? That's a sick joke. The truth is that he is every much a violator of international law as the dictator in Tunisia or the autocrats in Turkey and Hungary. In fact, Human Rights Watch has been quick to call out Texas's violation of international human rights law, just as they did for Tunisia and Turkey. What's going on in Texas right now, down at the border, isn't just a violation of law and of morality. It isn't just a usurpation of federal authority at the border by a power-hungry, authoritarian, attention-seeking Republican governor. It isn't just the logical, if depressing, outcome of decades of right-wing fear-mongering about migrants. It isn't just an urgent reminder that Democrats led by the Biden White House need to stand up to the GOP on the issue of immigration, on the issue of asylum, and stop meeting them in the middle. No, what's going on in Texas down at the border with the wire and the heat and the drowning and the miscarriage is, above all else, sadistic. It's cruel. It's barbaric, full stop. This isn't who we are, we often hear people say, but it is shamefully who we've become. So why on earth don't more Americans give a damn?